All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of PB Ballers. I'm your host, Albert. Today we have a very, very special episode. It is the Germany preview for Euro 2024, joined by a very special guest, Mr. Adam Kahn, German football consultant, calling in all the way from Cologne. Adam, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm really happy to be here. Happy to talk about Germany. We have less than a month to go now here in Germany. So yeah, starting to get excited, of course. In Germany, we still have, of course, Dortmund in the Champions League final, Bayer Leverkusen in the Europa League final. So there's a lot of football for us to be enjoying in the meantime. But yeah, the big one is coming up, and you can start to feel in the country people really getting a fever for it.
Yeah. It's going to be a really special summer for Germany, guys. Like Adam said, Dortmund is in the Champions League final, but more importantly, Germany is hosting a major tournament for the first time since, I believe, 2006. And the main reason we're making a video today is to react to Germany's initial preliminary 27-man squad dropped by Julian Nagelsmann, I believe, on Thursday afternoon. Adam, when you saw the names released on the squad, initial reactions, initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the main omissions, I would say, come from the Dortmund camp, as was kind of expected. Mats Hummels, I mean, stellar Champions League campaign. I would argue the player of the season in the Champions League amongst all teams, and the numbers even back that up. Like when it comes to tackles, interceptions, defensive duels, he's leading the charts on a per game and tournament wide basis. And also, I mean, just look at the last game against PSG, who scored the crucial
Yeah,
goal to send Dortmund through. So yeah,
yeah.
that's a big omission, and I can understand it on the one hand because I don't think he would be a starting player in this Germany team if they play in a back four. And Hummels, as we've seen from his time in Dortmund, also under Terzic, he's not an easy character when he's not a starting 11 player, but still, nevertheless, it's yeah a big player to leave home. And then the other one, Julian Brandt, of course, 25 goal contributions in 45 games. Again, one of the Dortmund players who's also been an absolutely stellar performer in the Champions League. The man of the match in the home leg against Atletico Madrid, and in general, I would say one of the more consistent players. I think that you do have other characters who kind of have a similar playing style to Brandt, who are ahead of him, like a Musiala, like a Wirtz, like a Kai Havertz, for example. Even a Leroy Sané plays, of course, a similar position. So I think that in that sense, maybe you just have too many profiles who are ahead of him in the pecking order. But still, it's obviously a big omission to leave a player on such good form at home.
And I kind of want to go off what you said about Hummels maybe not being someone who would be happy with a role on the bench. I believe that Antonio Rudiger and Jonathan Tah will be the two starting center backs for Nagelsmann at this tournament. But I remember, I think, reading quotes, especially about like Leon Goretzka, who said, I would be totally okay with the role on the bench. It's not something I would complain about. Has there been a history of Mats Hummels raising a stink in tournaments for Germany when he hasn't played at all? Is that a thing with him?
Yeah, I mean, in general, Hummels has always been a player who's played at tournaments, right? So that's
Hmm.
obviously the factor that's hard to judge. I mean, even when he came back in 2020 to the Euro squad just ahead of the tournament, he came back as a starter then immediately, right? And I think that's kind of one of the avenues where there's a lot of parallels between Thomas Müller and Mats Hummels. I mean, both are similar age, both have been around this Germany national team for a long time, and that duo were both kind of chastised and removed by Joachim Löw and then returned to the side in 2020. But whereas Müller wasn't necessarily a guaranteed starter on his return, Hummels was a player where it really was either he comes back in a starting role or he doesn't come back at all. And so yeah, that's where it's hard to judge. But I mean, in the Bundesliga at least, especially last season, we did see Hummels left on the bench quite a lot, and we did see that yeah, he had a difficult time with Terzic.
Mm,
You also need to reflect that I think Terzic is also a manager who doesn't necessarily demand the same respect when you're put on the bench than a guy like Julian Nagelsmann.
yeah.
No offense to Terzic, but I simply don't rate him as a manager that
Mm,
highly. And I think that a player like Mats Hummels or even a Marco Reus as well, who's also had his issues with Terzic,
yeah.
can also feel hard done by at times when other players are playing ahead of them. But yeah, I think that in general, Nagelsmann's decision to pick a squad also based off of mental profiles rather than
Mm,
just the 26 best players is uh, a good decision when you take into consideration a lot of the issues Germany faced at not only the last World Cup, but also the tournaments preceding that.
yeah. That's a really good point you make. And I think I read something about Nagelsmann saying he had even like asked the chefs in the national team what they observed during the dinners and lunches to see like who interacts well with each other, who gets along, who doesn't get along. I think he's really a modern manager in that sense, which is good in a lot of ways. And
Yeah.
I, I think maybe tactically speaking, he wants to play a bit of a higher line than Terzic does at Dortmund. So I don't, maybe Hummels doesn't have the pace to recover. So in that sense, I could see why he would omit him. So for you, it sounds like you understand why he was excluded because a lot of fans on Twitter, I think, were raising a stink about Matt's not being there. But
Yeah, I think that your point stands with the differences between how Dortmund play and how Germany play. And I think specifically when we look at where Hummels' best performance have come from the season, it's really been the Champions League matches where Dortmund are not taking control of the game, not
yeah,
trying to implement a high press, but are really sitting deep and looking to defend in a deep block. And I think also another reason why you can omit him from the squad is because you have a guy like Waldemar Anton there who profiles pretty similar to Hummels. He's also a player who has a lot of ball carrying, a lot of passing range. I would say he's kind of the quarterback, center back mold that Hummels has. And he's okay, he's not a young player, but he has a young national team career, which means he's also going to be willing to accept that backup role better. And just on the point of picking profiles again, I mean, a lot of people have given a lot of criticism to Nagelsmann for picking the four goalkeepers, and I think that you can justify reasons for not wanting to do that. I think that even a better idea would be to say, hey, I don't know how feasible it is, but maybe you can pay a goalkeeper a certain salary from the national team just to have him as a training goalkeeper for the tournament, especially when we're considering that it's home Euros, right? So it's not like anybody needs to fly out. You could even, let's say your base is in Frankfurt, then you bring Kevin Trapp for a week, and then your base is in another area, right? So I think there would have been ways around this, but the fact that he brings Oliver Baumann, I think, is exactly what we're talking about picking the right profiles. Because
yeah.
Baumann, okay, he's the third or fourth choice goalkeeper. He's probably never going to play, but he's really, even from his time at Hoffenheim, right? He's the captain at Hoffenheim. He's well respected across the league as a really good character. And I think these are the types of goalkeepers you need as your third goalkeeper that can play a really elemental role and kind of bringing the team together and then bringing that cohesive structure. So, especially on that position, I'm happy that maybe he forewent uh, the exact fourth best goalkeeper in Germany for then the right profile to mesh with this group.
Yeah, and let's talk about the goalkeeper. So he picked four, and he did say that I'm going to take all of these guys. A player that's going to be cut is from the outfield. When I first saw the first names on the list, I was like, oh, again, four goalies. But the point you make is also very valid. But also, I heard that Nagelsmann during training wants to have two goalies or two sets of goalies at once to kind
Yeah.
of play back and forth. So that makes sense as well. And obviously, he knows Baumann from his days at Hoffenheim. I think we all know Manuel Neuer is going to start in net. There was some questions about whether Marc-Andre ter Stegen would start, but I think those have been put to rest with, especially with Neuer's performances in the Champions League. But another interesting name in that goalie list, I think most fans don't know about, is Alexander Nubel. And forgive my horrible German pronunciation, but Nubel has been a guy who is technically a Bayern player, but he's on loan, I believe, at Stuttgart right now. So he was actually considered kind of the future successor of Manuel Neuer. And were you surprised to see him included in this list, considering that he hasn't really been called up to the senior team?
I mean, off his performances this season, it feels like a no-brainer. I mean, I think a lot of the credit for the Stuttgart resurgence goes to kind of Dennis Undav, Sarah Diassi, Chris Froose, these attacking players. But I mean, even more of the heart of what the Stuttgart team is this season, it's the defensive backbone. Last season, they kept 2 clean sheets in 34 Bundesliga games, the worst record in the league. And this year they have 11, right? So it's not like that's all down to Alexander Nubel, but he has a big, big role to play in that. Um, with the ball at his feet, he's still not the greatest goalkeeper, and it was an issue that, was pretty evident also before he signed for Bayern and has remained. But on his line, he's really a really, really solid shot stopper. My worry more so with this was the chances of Nubel coming to an appearance in this tournament are extremely low. And I don't know what the dynamic is between Neuer and Nübel. And I think that at Bayern, at least many years ago, 2, 3 years ago, it felt like that relationship was really untenable and it almost needed Nübel to be loaned out to kind of keep them at bay from each other because, I mean, as we see time and time again, Neuer is a fantastic goalkeeper, but not an easy character. I feel like it's a phrase you can use for basically every starting goalkeeper in Germany's history, from Oliver Kahn to Jens Lehmann to Neuer. They always seem to be great goalkeepers and difficult people.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why I'm almost happy a little bit that a guy like Baumann is there to maybe field a bit of peace because Neuer, Nübel, Ter Stegen is feels like there is going to be a fight breaking out at some point with three stellar goalkeepers that maybe all think they're either good enough for the first choice job for years now or have an agenda against Neuer and bad blood between them. So yeah, I'm interested to see how this one pans out, and maybe the bold prediction is that if Germany go out in the group stage, if that ends up happening, there will be some sort of dilemma in the goalkeeping camp.
Oh, well, if they go on the group stage, I think Neuer's done. During his time with the national team, he's what 38 right now. I think if we're being honest, I love the guy. I think he's the best goalkeeper of all time. But I think this probably should be his last tournament with the national team. I'm not sure how his body is going to hold up, especially when he hits 40 for the 2026 World Cup. And, that's a great point you bring up because in traditional tournaments, Neuer and Ter Stegen have not had a very good relationship. I remember
Yeah.
Marc-Andre is still pissed about the fact he didn't start in 2018 when Neuer was injured for the whole season, and he probably should
Yeah.
have started at that World Cup. And then you add Nübel, like you said, who is supposed to be Neuer's successor. Manuel's obviously a very prideful man, as he should be, but like you said, he's not the easiest person to deal with. But maybe so in that sense, maybe having four goalkeepers is good. I guess to finish off talking about the goalies, then let's look post Euro 2024, assuming that it goes well for Germany. Who would your pick be to take over the net for 2026, assuming that Manuel Neuer retires?
I think that it's really between Ter Stegen and Nübel. I don't think
Mm,
Baumann stands a chance. I don't think Kevin Trapp stands a chance. I also don't see any other goalkeeper rising through the ranks in Germany to be good enough for that stage. I mean, we have Artubulo, of course, at Freiburg, who has played a decent season, but 2026 is not that far away, right?
yeah,
And so I think that will still take a while. Um, I think Nübel would have to be in the Bayern net already to stand a chance of that. And if I'm not mistaken, he's loaned out for another 2 years to Stuttgart.
yeah,
And I don't see him coming in ahead of Ter Stegen. And I think Ter Stegen is one of the top five goalkeepers easily. I mean, people could argue he's the best goalkeeper, a top three goalkeeper, but I think anybody with a serious kind of football agenda would say he's a top five goalkeeper in the world
he
minimum,
is.
and I think that warrants him to get a tournament. And we saw also, I mean, let's not forget Germany's two best games in the last 8 years probably came with Marc-Andre Ter Stegen in net against France and against Holland a few months ago, right? So Ter Stegen has also proved for the national team, okay, maybe not in big occasions, but he's never really been offered a big occasion that he's a goalkeeper with the quality to field the net for a competitive international side.
Yeah, for me, like I'm a Bayern fan, but I admit that Ter Stegen is a very quality keeper. He starts for any other team in the world. Maybe it's bias that I have, but whenever I see him play for the national team, he always seems to have a big mistake in him. I remember he had a few games in the Confederations Cup in 2017. Had a pretty awful goal he gave up against Cameroon, I think it was. And then in the lead up to the Euros, I think he played in net against Slovakia once, had a horrible goal that he gave up off a corner kick. Did better against France and the Netherlands, but I just think that he has that Barcelona DNA, whatever it is, just to crap his pants at the wrong moment. But to be fair, Neuer's done some pretty awful things too in recent tournaments. He had that slip up against Costa Rica, spilled the ball against Madrid earlier this month. So I think Ter Stegen. I wonder what you think of this. I really like Stefan Ortega. I know he doesn't start at Manchester City, but I think he probably should start for any other EPL team. Do you think if he got starting minutes somewhere, he could also challenge for the number one spot once Manuel leaves?
Yeah, I think Stefan Ortega was a goalkeeper many wanted to see in this squad. I
Yeah,
think that would have also been an interesting selection because he knows what it's like to be in a number two or number three role and come into big games and perform. I mean,
yeah.
we're recording this just a few days after that Spurs game where he, I mean, basically saved City the title most
Oh,
likely.
yeah. Horrible miss by
So
Son, but yeah.
yeah, yeah, horrible miss, but also, I mean, it's a
Good
good
save.
save, right?
Good save. Yeah.
So he has a really, he's not the tallest goalkeeper, so he has a really interesting shot stopping selection,
Mm,
right? He does a lot with kind of that spread that
mm,
is really typical of a German goalkeeper. I think that's kind of the German school, this spread style.
yeah.
So for any I don't know EPL fans or coaches out there, if you're one on one versus Ortega, chip the ball because he always spreads.
Yeah.
But yeah, a really top goalkeeper. But like you say, he needs first team minutes to be in contention for this type of spot, and he needs first team minutes also at the same level that a Ter Stegen is at. So that would be a Champions League club. Um, we saw a few years ago when, or I believe what was that last year, when Neuer was out and Germany were on that frantic search for a number one goalkeeper, that Ortega's name made the
Yeah.
rounds and Bayern even made an offer. So it would have been really interesting to see what would have panned out had Ortega signed instead of Jan Sommer and how that
Mm,
would have changed the national team perspective. I think that even though City is probably, I mean, not a bigger club, of course, but a better club than Bayern right now, I think that for the national team, Bayern is still a pinnacle for kind of squad selection, and Ortega would have even gotten minutes under Julian Nagelsmann already, which would have been another interesting, yeah,
yeah.
element.
I just love him because when I see his interviews, he seems like a really very just good character, I think. And he seems like a very intelligent lad
Yeah,
as well.
yeah,
Um,
and you need to also reflect with Ortega. I mean, Ortega is not a Phil Foden who grew up in the City Academy, played youth national team, won international accolades, and with 17 was a top talent. Ortega was a player who I believe is what 28, 29 now, and
yeah,
3, 4 years ago was in the second Bundesliga as an average perspective goalkeeper. So I think that that's also an attitude that is also derived from maybe I don't know, maybe he did an apprenticeship at a car dealership 6 years ago because he never knew if football would work out, right? Like
right.
it's not like this is the same experience that probably most players in the City squad have gone through.
I think he's actually 31 right now. Now that I look at it, he's already in his 30s. But you're right. He was at Bielefeld for a bit, and now he's kind of made his way up. Kind of reminds me of like Klose before he made it big with the national team. I think he did like a carpentry course.
Yeah,
So
it's quite common. It's quite common in Germany.
yeah. I guess to round out the goalies, I do hope that over the next few seasons, Ortega gets loaned out somewhere and gets more playing time because I really do think he is one of the more underrated keepers for Germany. But yeah, it looks like it'll be Marc-Andre Ter Stegen's net post Manuel Neuer. I think we, kind of went over the defenders already. No big shocks besides the exclusion of Hummels. I guess one name I think I do want to focus on, since not a lot of people might know about him, is Maximilian Mittelstadt. Everyone knows about Rudiger. Everyone knows about Kimmich. Um, Mittelstadt kind of came out of nowhere in these last two friendlies. I know you've watched him for a while. Can you tell the international viewers what makes this left back for Germany so special?
Yeah, I think even for the German viewers, Mittelstadt came out of nowhere a little bit this season, not for this international camp, but this season. I mean, he was part of the Hertha Berlin squad that got relegated last year, and he was one of the few that was a bit more consistent, that he had the ability to stay in the top flight, but also not a player you would necessarily say didn't deserve to go down with the side. It wasn't a good season, and you felt like his career was stagnating a bit. And this year, like so many at Stuttgart, he's absolutely flourished under Sebastian Hoeneß. He's really played an elemental role there. His work in tandem with Chris Führich is really remarkable. How they constantly switch positions, how they work well with overlaps and underlaps. So that will be interesting to see if they ever play together. Of course, on this left side for Germany as well. And I mean, Mittelstadt, many will know him, of course, in the German national team so far from that goal he scored against Holland. But Mittelstadt is primarily, I would say, even more so renowned for his defensive work. Because if you think of Stuttgart, they play a lot with kind of a um a 3-5-2 with shifting fullbacks. So Mittelstadt will maybe be the deeper fullback that can form that three at the back, whereas the right back will push very high. And this gives Mittelstadt really a good defensive edge. He's very strong defensive duels, has a really reliant and consistent passing game. So yeah, he's kind of a ideal player to fit into a role in Germany that has consistently been a major issue since I've been alive for 15 years.
I mean, I remember 2014 World Cup when we had to play Hudes as the makeshift
Yeah.
left back. It worked for that tournament. He almost scored a few goals, but
They
long
almost scored
term,
almost the winner in the World Cup final.
off the
So
post, right? Just a few
yeah.
inches. But yeah, I mean, it has been a problem position. So I think the fact that Nagelsmann was able to find a solution so quickly by kind of going outside of the typical Bayern Dortmund routes is something we have to give him credit for, because I think, Adam, this was a problem under Hansi Flick. Too much favoritism, not enough creativity, picking the same players over and over who would shit their pants for the national team. I mean, for you as a scout, isn't this refreshing to get guys from other clubs that are outside of the traditional top four powers in Germany?
Yeah, I think that on the one hand, it's also, I would say with the left back role, it's not necessarily completely new. We saw guys like David Rome, guys like Robin Gosens also get this opportunity. And I think it's refreshing to see that Nagelsmann has gone for more of a true left back, because with David Rome, with Gosens, you always have the fear that they're going to get defensively exploited because they're just
Yes.
really, I mean, I wouldn't even classify Gosens as a fullback. I think he's a complete wingback and
Yeah,
nothing
he is.
less. And so from that perspective, it's very good to see Mittelstadt get this. And I think that, I mean, if Germany goes far at the European Championships, I think this country has a lot to thank for Sebastian Hoeneß, because what he has done with German players this year is remarkable. I would
I,
imagine. I mean, look at this squad. If we didn't have kind of this Stuttgart axis, what type of players would be in there? We'd have guys like probably Karim Adeyemi somehow getting into the squad still. We'd have a huge left back dilemma where every game we go in fearing for our defense. A key player off the bench, I think, this year will be a guy like Chris Füllkrug coming in with kind of
Mhm.
that dynamism and that cutting edge. At center forward, a guy like Dennis Undav, who kind of can play as that shadow role that Nagelsmann really likes, but also has a really elite goal output. So yeah, there's a lot to like from the Stuttgart squad and kind of the German assets that they have built that our country's now profiting from.
Man, I wanted Sebastian Hoeneß to coach the Korean national team. I remember there were rumors that we had reached out to him before his success.
while
Amazing.
while he was while he was out of a job in Hoffen, like so between
I
Hoffenheim and Stuttgart,
I'm not sure the exact time, but I believe so, right around that time.
like
Or
pre-Klinsmann then, right?
yeah, I think so. It might have been
Yeah. Okay.
he was recommended before we hired Klinsmann.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, the clowns at our federation decided to hire the devil himself. But glad for Honus, and he's probably going to get a bigger job in a few years' time. But it's great. Let's look at the midfielders. You talked about Chris Füllkrug, who I love. I've seen him live in the States last year. An excellent, versatile attacking player. I feel like you can play him on any side of the pitch, and he will provide some dynamism. I assume he's probably going to be like one of the first attacking subs off the bench.
Yeah, because Führich brings something really different to so many other players in the German squad. He's so straightforward a little bit in his game. He's not like a tricky winger. He doesn't really do a lot of skills or flair. He's really just a straightforward drive the goal and force defenders into decisions. And kind of I think that's the mentality you want. I mean, for example, like a guy like Karim Adeyemi has a similar style, but he's just a worse player. And I think that that's what Furish has above him. That the fact that he has a lot more end product, he has a lot. He's also taller. He has a better stance in his dribbling. He's more aggressive. And I think that yeah, the fact that you have players like Furish in the squad who haven't been part of the failures of the past, feel like they have nothing to lose, right? For Fuchs, it's been a spectacular season, regardless how the European Championships goes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no pressure on his shoulders. So, like you say, a player like that off the bench is exactly what you want. You don't want a player like, for example, a Leroy Sané coming off the bench, maybe, who has then far more pressure, who has the expectations of having not won a single trophy for Bayern this season, and now all the cards are on the European Championships. I think that is something that is important to note.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's important to the fact that Füllkrug wasn't there for the failures in the past, so he's fearless. Maybe like a bit of an Andre Schürrle type, I hope, when Schürrle did well at the
Yeah.
2014 World Cup. Looking at the midfield again, another name that's going to be important is Robert Andrich, who's going to be the new CDM next to Toni Kroos. For those who don't watch the Bundesliga, why is Andrich so important, not just for the national team, but for Bayer Leverkusen and their run with Xabi Alonso this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think there it's all about matching profiles, right? I mean, why was Sami Khedira so important for the national team, and why did Ilkay Gündogan never play? It's not because Gündogan was always a worse player than Khedira, but it's that Khedira had the profile to match Kroos. And in this squad, Robert Andrich has the profile to match Kroos. He's a real, I would say, a defensive terrier. He's a ball winner. He's a mentality monster. He's someone who is, you know, doesn't care about who Mbappe is. He'll give him a nasty tackle and tell him to get up 10 seconds later. So yeah,
Looks
he
like a
really,
barbarian.
yeah, he's I mean, just look at the clubs he's played for. He's played for Dynamo Dresden, one of the kind of far east clubs in Germany with a real workers mentality. He's played for FC Heidenheim, again, really industrious club who have come from nothing to succeed in the Bundesliga. And he's played for Union Berlin, which I don't think anybody needs to say what Union Berlin football is like. It's all hard work against the ball, putting in a tackle. So yeah, these elements have been so important in this Bayer Leverkusen squad to kind of bring the lights of a Florian Wirtz, Victor Boniface, Jeremy Frimpong, these uber talents, and kind of elevate them to the next level with kind of these senior players like Andrich who can bring the backbone to allow them to flourish. But I also don't think we should discredit Andrich on the ball. I mean, he has a 90% pass completion in the Bundesliga. He's simple but efficient, and also he's well worth an important goal. He's scored many late goals in the Bundesliga this season to keep Bayer Leverkusen's unbeaten run going. And I mean, just a few weeks ago, that 2-0 against AS Roma showcased what he can do from long range. So I think that Andrich is really the perfect element to pair with Toni Kroos.
I
And
agree.
maybe interesting as well, Robert Andrich's history of Kroos. He's actually played with his brother Felix Kroos at Union Berlin, so
Did not
he
know that.
knows he knows he knows how to deal with a Kroos midfield, whether it's his brother who maybe isn't so talented or maybe the more talented Tony.
So he has practice at the family. That's good then.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, yeah, this midfield I think is probably the strongest part of Germany's team. I know a lot of people in saying Germany's dropped off in recent years. I don't think that's the case. I think the midfield is a top 5 level midfield in Europe at least. And we look at the list, and there's not a lot of like egregious omissions, but I think I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Leon Goretzka is exclusion. I don't know what you think of Leon. For me, I'm the same age as him. I watched him kind of develop through the national team. I remember his run at the 2017 Confederations Cup when I thought he was the second coming of Michael Ballack. Has had a few down seasons, to be honest. Adam, what do you think of the exclusion? And also, more importantly, if you were the manager, would you have taken him in this squad?
Yeah, I'm really caught between two minds with Goretzka. I think that in January, February, it would have been an easy call, right? His form went out the window. He wasn't performing at all. So there it was simple to keep him out of the squad. But since then, he's really raised his level. I mean, obviously the Champions League against Real Madrid didn't go his way
He didn't play the
with
second
a
leg.
poor
Yeah.
with a poor first performance and kind of being left out entirely in the second leg. But I think that Goretzka can be a really important player in matches like we saw against Arsenal, for example, when Germany are really not dictating possession, they're in a bit of more of a counter-attacking play. Like for example, let's say Germany played against a France again in a France that's in big tournament mode, right? Which is obviously different than France in friendlies, and a France with Antoine Griezmann as well, of course, who wasn't available. Then you're going to have to go through phases of games where you really don't see a lot of the ball. And in those moments, Goretzka is for me, still one of the best box to box midfielders. He has one of the best work rates. He is one of the best physical specimen in the game. He is good at making late runs into the box. He's good at getting into goal scoring scenarios. He's quite good also as an 8 defensively. So those moments, I still think Goretzka brings a different element to this squad than maybe bringing Gross, Gundogan, Gross again, and Pavlovic. I think those profiles are maybe all a bit too similar for me. I would have maybe preferred a guy like Goretzka then, or then also even maybe an Angelo Stiller
Yeah,
again as part of that Stuttgart core. But yeah, I think that there may be a moment in this tournament where we'll look back and say Goretzka and the Goretzka we saw at Arsenal in that Arsenal game would have been an important element in this team.
absolutely. And I think especially when you're down by a goal and you're lobbing balls into the box, you need a late runner like him coming in because he could
Hmm.
head it or, muscle his way through some guys. I mean, you saw how important he was in that game against Hungary back at the last Euros.
Yeah,
With that,
exactly. And I
I
believe he
think
also came off the bench in
yeah,
that
he came
game,
off the
right?
bench. He
Yeah,
came off the
yeah,
bench, and I just think that a lot of fans don't like him because he doesn't have the on-ball skills of a Tony Kroos. But
yeah,
you don't need all your midfielders to do that. Like we said, we have enough ball players. You need guys to get in there physically. And to be honest, Adam, I look at the midfielders on the list; they're all talented, but I see a lack of strength besides Robert Andrich. Do you worry
yeah,
that they could get out muscled, especially if Andrich goes down with an injury?
yeah. For certain, I think that I mean you cannot play a midfield pairing of Gundogan and Kroos, right?
No.
I think that even Nagelsmann's aware of that. I think that Hansi Flick and Joachim Löw would have maybe tried to still persist with that, but I think it's quite clear you can't do that. And I mean Pavlovic is a really clever defender. He's good at intercepting play, good at reading play. Also, I mean he has a good frame. He's not physically the strongest, but he has a good size and he knows how to work with his body quite well. But I mean, he's born in 2004, right? He's 20
He's
or
a kid.
19 years
Yeah,
old,
19.
and
Yeah.
and I would say the hardest position in international football at that age is holding midfield in a defensive role in knockout style football. So yeah, I understand why you bring Pavlovic to this tournament. Also with the Serbia context and the fact that you also want to ensure that this player is here for the future. But I also, again, like you say, I fail to see a scenario where he has the profile to play in this side if everybody is fit. And
I I
when
don't think
everybody is
I don't think he's
fit,
playing. Yeah.
when everybody is fit, I still see scenarios where Goretzka would play. And I think that one of the aspects where you mentioned, of course, Goretzka's inability really in build-up phases. A reason why this has also been so prominent in Bayern is because he's had to pair with Konrad Leimer often, who is the same profile basically as Goretzka,
Yeah.
or very, very similar profile as Goretzka. And then you also don't have the player who can necessarily take that burden off of Leon. And what we haven't seen as often is the Goretzka Pavlic pairing, where Pavlic can then do a little bit more of that aspect of the game. And also we haven't seen Goretzka be selected above Lima because Lima's also been one of Bayern's best performers in the
Yeah.
last half of the season, and that's kind of where Goretzka has, yeah, Goretzka's, I would say, even maybe not been selected for the German national team because of Konrad Laimer, even though Konrad Laimer is of course Austrian, but because of Konrad Laimer's form, Goretzka hasn't then
Yeah.
been afforded that spotlight moment in the second leg versus Madrid.
Yeah. And I guess to round out the midfield, let's talk about Alexander Pavlovich. I think people who don't watch the Bundesliga don't know how special this kid is.
Yeah,
When I saw him, I thought he was a CDM from what I heard. And then I saw him play and I was like, "Oh, he's more of like a deep lying playmaker, I think."
yeah,
Did
yeah.
you
That's what
Yeah.
I was about to say. I was about to say, yeah, deep line playmaker 100%. I think the first time I saw Pavlovic, I saw him once when he got subbed on for Germany,
Mm.
for Bayern, just like a few minutes then at the end of one game. And then the first real game was England U20 versus Germany U20 earlier this year. And there, like you say, I mean, like such a deep line playmaker, kind of the dying breed, I would say, in modern football, but does it really, really eloquently. Um, and yeah, you see his technical finesse, how he turns with the ball, how he has a really good feel for kind of when to play a long ball, when to play a short ball, and the fact that he already has so much trust from his teammates. Because to play as a deep line playmaker means you need to get on the ball a lot, you need to constantly be dictating the tempo, and quickly it feels like the Bayern team players are willing to give Pavlovic the ball and willing to allow him to pull the strings. And for his future, I think as a Bayern fan, you should be really excited to see Pavlovic spend a few weeks now alongside Tony Kroos, learning from him in training, learning from basically the player model that I would say Pavlovic would hope to be one day. And yeah, I don't think I can ever say a player will reach Toni Kroos's level just because Toni Kroos for me is a Ballon d'Or contender this season. But I think if we had to select at least a player out of Germany who could mirror Toni Kroos's career, I would put my hopes on Alexander Pavlovic.
Yeah, guys, this is why you have to watch the Bundesliga. Okay, the EPL is great, but there's so many talented players coming up through all these clubs. Yeah, Pavlovic, I think, is probably going to be a starter in 2026 for this tournament. Like you said, learn from Toni Kroos and then get better. And I guess as we round out the midfield, since we all know about Jamal Musiala and Florian Wirtz, I think everyone by now knows how special they are. Adam, do you have an update on the knocks they're suffering? I believe Jamal has a knee issue and Florian has a thigh problem, and also Leroy Sané is dealing with a pubic bone issue. Do you think that's going to be a problem for the attack? Because that's like 3 starters who are hurt.
Yeah, I think that was a big reason also why Nagelsmann decided to keep Gnabry out of the squad
Mm,
because there's already so many injury issues that he really can't take another serious
yeah.
problem with him. Um, I think Wirtz is the one that's really the most difficult to judge because he's kind of playing, kind of not playing. He's not even really training. He's not going to any games that are of no importance. But then he comes on the last 10 minutes against AS Rome and he looks as good as ever and
Crazy.
instrumental in 2 goals, right?
Yeah.
So if that's Florian Wirtz with a muscle injury, then God knows what Florian Wirtz is capable of when he's back to full fitness. So I think that's one where we'll have to wait and see. I mean, Leverkusen have 3 more games. 2 of them, I think, Wirtz will definitely play in the Europa League final and the DFB Pokal final. Um, and I think you're really hoping that there isn't kind of that sudden moment where something goes twing, because I think that there's a fine line that Xabi Alonso is treading there. But I also think Xabi Alonso's in his rights to do that if Leverkusen are gunning for a treble and one of the most historic seasons in European history. With Jamal Musiala, I'm not as sure exactly what the injury is. You said knee injury.
It's a knee tendon issue, and he's been getting painkillers and injections for the past month to play. So
Yeah, so I would imagine that Musiala would probably be fine. I mean, if we also look at it, he has what 4 weeks until the start
yeah,
of the
and he's
Euros,
he's not playing this weekend, so he's
and
just
he's
gonna
not
rest
playing.
until
Yeah,
yeah.
so I think that will be one that can sort itself out, and also I think that what's good also with this squad, and not to undermine Germany's group, but I mean Switzerland, Hungary, and Scotland is not the most difficult test that I think that a guy like Chris Führig also, for example, couldn't start in necessarily
Mm,
and help Germany get over the line. So I think that you also have good moments in the group stage to potentially rotate this side and give rests where needed. And then the final one you mentioned, Leroy Sané, is also one that I think is worrying because we really saw kind
mm,
of a player on his final legs for months now. I think that the European Championships will maybe go okay, but I think that the long-term scenario, more so maybe as a Bayern fan for next season, also is quite worrying actually with Leroy Sané because I mean, yeah, he seemed to really sacrifice a lot to play in those Champions League matches, and he played incredible, I would say, in those Champions League matches. Probably, I could argue even maybe Bayern's best attacker throughout the Arsenal and Real Madrid legs, but that there isn't going to be long-term damages there, or that there isn't going to be some issues that continue to pop up next season for a player who already has his fair share of injury issues is something that, yeah, if I had to bet, I would say that that's something that's going to come back to haunt specifically Bayern next season.
yeah. Well, I think with Leroy, and I love him as a player, it's just he's had so many injury issues. I've never seen him play one full season consistently without an injury or without a dip in form. And I hate to say this,
Yeah,
while I think he is an important player, I don't think it's the end of the world if he's not necessarily in the starting 11. Like you said, there are other options. I think the most important is probably Wirtz and Musiala being in full
yeah,
fitness because, like you said, they're going to be ones operating the half spaces. But let's look at the forwards. Now, I know for years we've talked about how Germany has no center forward because of Miroslav Klose's retirement. Adam, Niclas Füllkrug is a Champions League finalist. I mean, listen, I know he's not. I'm never gonna say he's a good technical footballer, but I think for what he is in terms of holding up the ball and being a target man, it could be worse, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that he's not necessarily the prototype hold up center forward. I think that he is still quite poor at holding up possession with his back to goal for a player of his size. But I think that what's always remarkable with Fulkert is that every single obstacle he has now encountered in his career, be it Fulkert isn't going to be good enough for the German national team at the World Cup. Well, he scored at the World Cup and was arguably, I mean, he barely played, but was still arguably our best player, which maybe reflects more about the national team, but nevertheless, a good tournament from Fulkert, right? Or then you made the argument, okay, yeah, Füllkrug, okay, he's good enough in the Bundesliga maybe, but he's never going to be good enough for real Champions League matches. And then you see, okay, he scored against Atletico, he scored against PSG as well. So even there, and he scored against PSV Eindhoven also. So even there, you see a player who has, yeah, really shown through at all the stages. He doesn't necessarily always look like a Champions League striker with his technical finesse, right? He still has kind of real errors in his game that is normal of a player who maybe only made the breakthrough so late in his career and
Yeah.
was also, I mean, he had a lot of injuries, but there was also reasons why he was at clubs like Bremen and Hannover and not big clubs before then. But like you say, if we have no other player like this in the German national team or in the wider pool of players, which is true. I mean, your next best is like Kevin Behrens, who scored
Oh,
1 goal in the last 9 months. So if you have no other player of this model, and then it's clear that you bring Niklas Füllkrug in the squad, especially when he seems to gel really well with the other characters. It seems like Niklas Füllkrug, wherever he goes, is really a great player for a locker room who can kind of bring, like you said, with Stefan Arcade, or like we say with Oliver Baumann, who brings kind of this not superstar mentality, who is kind of also has a bit of a feeling of, hey, I'm happy to be here, and I want to do this not for personal accolades, but because I just think it's a great opportunity to play for my country whenever that presents itself.
mm.
And I think that, yeah, it's really good to have him as a player and as a character at this tournament.
Yeah, I think the main question here is I think Thomas Muller is going to come off the bench. He's okay with that. Undov, I think, will play, but probably as like a shadow striker, like you said later on in the match. I think so. The biggest question here is does Julian Nagelsmann play Kai Havertz as the center forward, or does he just play Niclas Füllkrug as the 9? What do you think he's going to do, and what would you do if you were the coach in terms of the number 9?
Yeah, I think that I mean, we're gonna get into the starting lineup in a
Yeah,
second, right?
we
So,
should actually. So let's do that. Okay, guys. So we're gonna do our starting lineup predictions. Adam will go first. Adam, you can give me the starting lineup that you think Nagelsmann will play, and also give me the lineup that you would play if you were the coach.
so I would say it's obviously a little bit dependent on who we play, right?
Okay.
Because I think that how you play against Scotland and how you play against France in a final is obviously a little bit
Mm,
different.
mm,
But I would say why don't we just maybe say Scotland, right, as it's the first
sure.
game.
Sure.
So I think that like the defense seems to pick itself. I think
Mm-hmm.
he'll stay basically exactly like he did against the friendlies against Holland.
French and
Other
Holland.
than of course Neuer will come back in goal, but
Yeah.
then you have Joshua Kimmich as the right back, Rüdiger and Ta, and then Maximilian Mittelstädt. And of course, it's also interesting that Joshua Kimmich is also listed as a defender, right?
Yeah.
So it seems then pretty clear that he will be playing as a fullback, whether he likes it or not.
He better like
Um,
it.
then the midfield again. I think that for me the axis of Andrich and Gross pits itself. Um, and then above that, there is a bit of dilemma here, right? Because Ulka Gundogan is the captain, but was the guy throughout recent weeks, and also I think even in a club context at Barca, is not a player on the same caliber right now that someone like a Leroy Sané, Florian Wirtz, and Musiala midfield would be. So if we're talking about what I would prefer, I would probably go with that. Or even in that central position, have a Kai Havertz floating around or an Undav floating around. But I mean, all of Undav, Havertz, and Sané would be picked for me ahead of Gundogan in that
Mm.
midfield because for lack of a better phrasing, I would say Gundogan stands in the way of Kroos a little bit because Gundogan is also a player who wants the ball to feet, who wants to combine in the spaces that Kroos is. And as much as I like Gundogan, and I really do like Gundogan, and for me, I mean, without Kroos, Gundogan is a key player in the squad, but with Kroos, Gundogan is surplus to first 11 requirements. Um, and that's why I would probably then go for my ideal 11 with Kai Havertz in that number 10 role, just based off of club form and the fact that he's showing some really promising moments.
Mm.
And also that matches like Scotland and Hungary also may give him the opportunity to gain a little bit of confidence in the
Yeah.
group stage that, Havertz is a confidence player,
Hmm.
right? He's a player who's streaky, like a Sané as well. And then also, I mean, give Sané maybe a bit more rest as well for him to then become more of a key player later in the tournament.
Hmm.
So then I would have Havertz in the middle, Musiala and Wirtz on the wide, and then Füllkrug up top. And I think the only change to my 11 and Nagelsmann's 11 is that he would play Gundogan then as that 10 role instead of any of the other selections.
Yeah, literally that. I'm so glad you said that because have a dream for Havertz to play right under Füllkrug. They did play with each other for the second half a bit against Costa Rica, the World Cup, and they wreaked absolute havoc.
Yep.
Granted, I know Germany were desperate at that point, but I really love the way they fed off each other. I think Kaya really works a lot better when he's playing off the shoulder of a number 9 as opposed to being up top by himself. Yes, guys, my starting 11 is the exact same as Adams, except I would have Havertz as the 10 instead of Gundogan. I think it was Hansi Flick to strip Neuer of the captaincy and give it to Gundogan is still one of the biggest mistakes on a long time because now that Toni Kroos is back, like you said, we don't need Gundogan in the starting 11, but you're not going to put the captain on the bench, are you?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think the issue is I think you did have to obviously strip Neuer of the captaincy. I
Hmm.
think that's a decision that made sense. I think that I mean, it wouldn't have made sense to basically go through a whole new cycle, a year-long cycle without Neuer, and then he comes back and is the guaranteed captain, especially
Yeah.
because you have a goalkeeper debate
Hmm.
ahead of that injury, right? I mean, nobody knew how Neuer would respond from the injury.
Hmm.
But for me, like you say, I think that Gundogan is in a central role that it did somehow feel evident that Kroos was going to come back into this team. I mean, let's
Yeah.
not kid ourselves. Like, did anybody really think that Kroos would not want to play a home European Championships? Like, it's obvious that Kroos did not feel like playing friendly matches all over the world for the last 2 years, but Kroos is the caliber of player where he can do that. Like, I think you
Yeah.
need to respect that. And so I felt like that was pretty clear. Do I think Kroos should be the captain now? No, I don't think that
Mm.
you give the captaincy to someone who hasn't been there for 2 years. But I think that instead you give the captaincy to someone like Antonio Rudiger, who
Mm.
I think that Rudiger maybe has, yeah, a bit of a leadership dilemma in his own right. I think that he has, I think in Germany we say he has a Pfeil im Kopf, which basically means he has an arrow in his head, which kind of can tell you a little bit about kind of the
Not the
mentality
most
issues that have
normal,
plagued him.
not the most
Yeah,
normal guy. Yeah.
exactly. But I think that Rudiger is really important also from not just like his athleticism and his
Mm.
defensive qualities, but also for the fact that I mean he feels like someone who is willing to also shout and scream and get
Mm.
animated in the right moments. And I think that that's something that really plays well off of some of the other players in your squad, like a Toni Kroos, like a Manuel Neuer, like a Joshua Kimmich. Rudiger has, I mean, Rudiger also like his ethnic background, right, is different than so
Yeah.
many of these other players in the German squad. So he just brings a different cultural upbringing, a different type of mindset to this team, and I think that that's something that can be very important alongside the fact that he's a guaranteed starter who doesn't give you this dilemma like a guy like Gundogan has.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the list right now, I don't think I would want Joshua Kimmich to get the captaincy. I like him as a player. I just think he's a bit too hot-headed at times.
Yeah, and again, the Kimmich one is again one that opens unnecessary scrutiny from the media.
Mhm.
You don't want these problems going into a tournament where Kimmich is then put under additional pressure than he already is. I mean,
Yeah.
Kimmich is a guy who is really like, I don't know how much time we have left in this podcast, but I mean, we could do a whole nother hour on
Yeah.
how poorly Kimmich has been treated in Germany over the
Well,
past
no, I mean,
two
don't worry.
years.
We have time, but yeah, you're right. I think Kimmich also is one of those guys who mentally has been traumatized by the failures
Exactly.
with the
Yeah.
national team. I remember after the Costa Rica game, he talked about how like he was in like this black hole of depression where he just never felt this way before. And I think you're right. Can you expand more on the media attention given by Joshua Kimmich? Because for those who don't know from the outside, to me, he was considered the next Philipp Lahm, the next Bastian Schweinsteiger. But it seems like while he has won a lot of trophies, I don't think he's ever been loved by the public as much as the previous generation. And is there a reason for that?
Yeah, I think that Kimmich himself is a very introverted character. Um, and the difference between, I mean, Philipp Lahm is also a really introverted
Mhm.
character, but the difference to that scenario is that Philipp Lahm then had also a Bastian Schweinsteiger and these other extroverted characters around him, right? That could
Mhm.
kind of field that external pressure and didn't necessarily give the scrutiny to Philipp Lahm. And you
Mhm.
also need to take into consideration, I mean, a lot has changed also in the media world in the last 10 to 15 years, and also specifically the sports media world, right? And Kimmich has come up in football in a completely different scenario than Philipp Lahm was in during his start of his career in 2002 2006. Also in a football context, right? Lahm was reaching the German national team in a moment where the German national team was on the floor following the debacle in 2004 and the preceding tournaments, versus Kimmich entered the national team almost directly off of the biggest achievement this country has made, or the biggest achievement this
Yeah.
country's made in the 21st century. So yeah, there's obviously that timing issue that Kimmich had to deal with, and then the fact that, I mean, Kimmich hasn't made life easy with the fact that he is pretty open and animated about what position he wants to play. And there's I understand, I think that his best role is in midfield,
Mm.
but I think his best role for this team is at right back.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that he needs to accept, and something I think he is accepting, at least in the German national team context. I think regarding Bayern, I think what I also want for Kimmich, maybe even, is for him to make a step to a club like Barcelona, for example, or to
Mm.
make a step into a foreign country, because I think that his his presence in the German national team will improve because of it, because he's not under so much scrutiny on a daily, weekly
Mm.
basis, and because he's allowed to play in a role that suits him better and allows him to kind of work like a, I would say, a Frankie De Jong in Barcelona, that type of role where maybe he then has a guy like Robert Andrich next to him, and okay, he's not Tony Kroos, but he's still a very talented player who can bring a lot of other qualities to the game. But yeah, that's what I would hope for the Joshua Kimmich situation. But I'm quite optimistic that I don't think that there's going to be issues with Joshua playing at right back. I think that he also has a level of respect for Nagelsmann. I think that,
Mhm.
that's was shown throughout the time at Bayern, that despite all of the external noise and all of the issues surrounding, I mean, Joshua Kimmich is selected by every manager he plays for. So it seems like, at least internally, there's a level of respect that goes both ways, and there's also a lot of football appreciation that goes both ways.
Yeah, for me, I've always been torn about him. The first time I really remember watching him was at the 2016 Euros when there was a quandary at right back, and Yogi Low inserted him as the starting right back against Northern Ireland. And I remember watching it, going, "Oh my God, this kid is like the next Philipp Lahm. He's the next Cafu. He's this incredible player." But then you see him play in the midfield for Hansi Flick, and then you're like, "Oh well, he's quite good on the ball. He likes to control the pace of the play." But then again, as a midfielder, I don't think he's good enough defensively in many aspects. He's always going to need someone next to him to do the dirty
Yep.
work. Uh, but again, as a right back, he doesn't have the pace. He's not the most solid defensively. I think we saw him go up against Vinicius in the Champions League semifinal. Do you think that he's going to stay at right back for the duration of this tournament, or do you think there's a possibility where Heinrichs comes in and Kimmich gets moved up into the midfield if something happens?
I do see him staying at right back for the remainder of the tournament. And I think
Mhm.
I slightly disagree with you. I think he is a good defender. I think he's actually a
Mm.
very good 1v1 defender. I think that he struggles
I think he
in
struggles
moments
against
like you.
pace, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. He struggles in open spaces. We saw it. A good example is also the goal that Karim Adeyemi scored against Bayern in that match in the Bundesliga a few weeks ago. If
Mm.
listeners maybe want to go back and look at those highlights, because you
Yeah.
see it there, right? Like Bayern have a turnover in midfield. Konrad Laimer, Goretzka both jump on the ball, and then there's kind of this high defensive line from Bayern with Kimmich at right back against Karim Adeyemi, right? And he simply doesn't stand a chance. So that's an issue. But something we also need to mention is the fact that um, against Real, it was obviously Kimmich next to De Ligt, and in Germany, it's Kimmich next to Antonio Rudiger, who is for me like physically the prototype of what you want at center back. He's fast, he's strong, he's really really good across the first meters. So
Don't you think?
that will go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. I thought Ta was going to be the RCB. Usually Ta plays on the right side, and doesn't Rudiger play on the left side? Or is Tony
Uh,
going to play it?
I I think so. Rudiger's right-footed,
Yeah.
so for me, it makes the most sense at least to pair Rudiger and Kimmich
Kimmich.
together, just just because of the pace aspect.
Hmm.
Um, but as you mentioned, but even a Ta, like Ta is okay. Ta has struggles over the first meters, right? He's not exactly the most agile, but his
Hmm.
top speed's also remarkable and something that can help counteract and balance that. And we also saw for Kimmich against France and against Mbappe, he did extremely well. So I don't see as many fears for like I'm more optimistic of a Joshua Kimmich than for example if we had David Raum playing left back on the other side
And
for
you
for
forgive
these
me.
defensive
You were right.
quandaries.
Sorry, I looked at the starting lineups against Germany or against France and Netherlands, and Ta was on the left side and Tony was on the right.
Yeah, and I think that was probably I would say a conscious decision also from Nagelsmann to try and balance that
Mm,
factor which you just mentioned.
right. Well, yeah, and I think that the defense is still looking a lot better than it did at previous tournaments, especially with the emergence of Ta as a solid player for Leverkusen. So I mean, we talked about the roster, Adam. What are the expectations in Germany? Because you're living there full time. How is the public feeling going into this tournament compared to the last tournaments? Because I know the national team has had a lot of bad kind of juju with the public in the past few years.
Yeah, I think that a lot of things have gone really well to cement this bond in recent weeks, months. So
Mm,
the Nagelsmann appointment was really impressive. The Nagelsmann contract extension was also impressive to show that hey, there's a commitment beyond this tournament, and this should also be something that yeah, it's not just kind of a nice summertime opportunity for Nagelsmann before he finds his next job, but something he also is willing to commit to. Um, like we mentioned so many times, the wins against France and Netherlands show that this team can compete with other elite countries. The return to Tony Kroos to the national team, right? A huge player. Um, a guy like Robert Andrich filling that Sami Khedira role that this country's been looking for ever since the 2014 World Cup. Yeah, Joshua Kimmich playing right back instead of this whole dilemma being there, and the fact that you have, in general, so many players in really, really good form entering this competition. I would say, like, even the Bayern players, for example, have also raised their level since the last international break happened for club. I think that even despite the difficulties that Bayern had this season, I think that they're actually kind of ending the campaign with players in decent form and with a bit of confidence. Okay, we mentioned the injuries, of course, but even a guy like Leroy Sané, after such a big dip in form, can still go into this competition knowing, hey, I scored against Real Madrid in the Champions League semifinal. If I can do that, then I can
Hmm.
do anything I want at the European Championships, and I have the quality to do so.
Hmm.
So that obviously brings a lot of optimism. And then off the field, the way the Germany squad was announced, right, by kind of getting various social media stars on board, um, getting kind of a real optimistic hype through Twitter, through social media, and doing it in also, I would say, an organic way, right? Because you're always taking a risk with those types of things, but it seemed
Hmm.
to also really resonate with the youth. Um, Also the jerseys, I think, like they seem like kind of silly, stupid things, but I mean these things matter, right? Especially in a country
Yeah.
like Germany at the moment where you have so little optimism around the national team. The fact that you really made good jerseys, the fact that your away jerseys are good, your home jerseys are good. There's a real feeling of yeah, I want to wear that jersey and I want to be part of this whole thing. So that's something that I think can definitely help this country when you consider, I mean, what, last January the national team went out at the or last December the national team went out at the World Cup and it was disaster.
Yeah.
So for that turnaround in such a short space of time, I think that anybody can be happy the German national team is going into this tournament with that scenario. And then on the field, um, yeah, it's kind of been the scenario for quite some time now. But I mean, like individually this country has the ability to compete with every single nation at this competition. Like there's a reason why Bayer Leverkusen are in the final. There's a reason why Bayern and Dortmund were in the semifinals, the Champions League, and now Dortmund is in the final. And there's a reason why arguably Stuttgart is the best of all of them, and they're not even in any of these European competitions.
Hmm.
So there's a reason why like there's individual talent in this German roster. There's also a team that is coming together and has the different utilities and has the different kind of models of players to function effectively. And the question is if they're already at the level to make it happen altogether, or if maybe we still need to wait until the 2026 cycle for really all
Hmm.
these elements to come together. And then I would also finally say that international tournament, there's always a bit of luck involved, right?
Yeah.
Like Germany could go out in the quarterfinals and it'd be a disaster tournament, but Muller didn't score against, what was it, Niclas Pope or
Pickford.
Pickford, right? And who knows, if he had scored against
Yeah.
Pickford, then maybe Germany would have went to the final and we would have
Hmm.
been talking about the resurgence, and Jurgen Löw would have somehow stayed at the national team, and
Yeah.
and and Benedikt Höwedes would have came back at left back and
Well,
everything.
Muller's
Like,
allergic to scoring at a European championship, so
yeah.
he should.
No, but you know what I mean, right? There's always
Yeah.
these small moments ultimately decide one match knockout stage football. So
Yeah.
I would say uh, Germany need to make it past the first knockout stage. They need to
So,
make it to the knockout stage and then make it past at least one game to not be here labeled as a disaster. And then anything beyond that point, the squad is capable of winning, but they're also going to come up against opponents who are also capable of
mhm.
winning. And there it's about, yeah, I would say finding moments to put your individual talent into a stage where they can show their quality and reducing the amount of mistakes in defensive phases, right? Like look at Bayern in the Champions League. Look at your countryman Kim Min Jae, right? Like
Oh, yeah,
individual mistakes ultimately decide games at this really elite level.
they do. Yeah. So it sounds like to me what I'm hearing is that the minimum is to win a knockout game, so advance to the quarters at least. Um, I'm
Is that
looking.
true? How many knockout games are there?
There are going to be. It's the round of 16. It's going to be the same round of 16, quarter, semis, final.
Like the Champions League basically.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
Okay.
looking at the brackets now. Assuming that Germany takes care of business in Group A. In terms of predictions,
Which
okay.
which 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 is not easy when you look at Switzerland with Granit Xhaka, and
Yeah.
so I wouldn't so yeah, we don't need to open that can of worms, but But I think that Switzerland will be a very, very difficult test.
Yes. I think that they'll win the first game against Scotland. It will be a tough game. It'll be close. I actually think they probably draw Hungary in the second match. And then the Swiss game it could go any way, I think. But I mean, Germany should advance in the group, whether that's first or second.
Yeah.
Looking at the brackets, assuming they finish first, I'm just being optimistic, but let's say they finish first. They're gonna avoid the French and English side of the bracket. I'm going way past, it's not here yet, but assuming they win the round of 16 match, it's going to be against third place team, or it's going to be against the runner up of Group C. Group C runner up will probably be Slovenia, Denmark, Serbia. Assuming they take care of business, I think the big test will be in the quarterfinals. It's looking like they will play the winner of Group B, which could be one of Spain, Italy, or Croatia. Right now, obviously, I think the French are the favorites, but I mean, this German team, I still say is good enough to take down a Spain or Italy. Granted, historically, they don't play well against those Mediterranean teams, but would you be nervous if they came up against a Spain or an Italy in the quarterfinals?
I mean, Germany could come up against Albania in the quarterfinals, and
That's
I would
true.
also be nervous. It's a quarterfinal at the Euros, right? So I
True.
think that you're always nervous. I think that you would initially be optimistic that you didn't face France or England. I
Hmm.
think those are still for me the two favorites. I think that Italy are a really hard team to judge
Yeah.
ahead of this tournament. I think that they are almost a 1 year cycle behind Germany,
Hmm.
even in kind of their squad turnover and where things stand. I think they have more question marks than Germany, for example. Um, and Spain, as you mentioned, is just so difficult for Germany. For some reason, Germany simply cannot ever find a way to really convince against Spain. And that's a game, for example, where yeah, I may be sitting on the couch thinking, why didn't we bring Leon Goretzka here? Because a match against Spain in the Euros is kind of the exact fixture where I could see a lot of value for Leon Goretzka to chase down Rodri and to really
Hmm.
apply that pressure versus Gundogan applying that pressure to Rodri is not necessarily something that I would be as keen on.
All right. So, well, let's just wrap it up then. So, how far is Germany going, Adam? And also, who's winning the Euros for you as of today?
I think Germany will make it to I think Germany will make it to the final, and I think France will win.
France will win the final.
And I
Okay.
think it will be heartbreaking to see France celebrate on German soil.
Oh,
But
very weird scene, I would say.
yeah,
For me, I was going. I think that if they can get past the quarters, and again, I'm going too far ahead, but if they can beat one of those Mediterranean teams in the quarters, they will make the final. Um, I watched the French team for a bit. I saw their squad announcement. Some interesting choices. I think they're taking N'Golo Kante. Weird.
yeah.
I don't trust the French. I don't. They have the best team in the world, I think, in terms of talent, but they just don't have whatever it is in the locker room, whatever shenanigans Mbappe gets up to. I don't like their dynamic, and call me
This is
crazy.
what
Okay.
we this is what we say every tournament, I think. I think every tournament we go in saying France have a weird locker room, too many individual players, and they somehow Mbappe is like Steph Curry in the playoffs where he's been waiting all season, you know, doing some light free throws, doing some free pointers, taking a break there, putting up I don't know 20 points a game, and then when the real moments come, Mbappe is there like no other, and I think
He's
that's
he's a
for me where yeah.
he's a part-time player. I think he only gets up for the French games, not for PSG. But I'm gonna put my money where I want this. It's gonna be a Germany-France final. I'm gonna say Germany wins it, 2-1 in extra time. Um, I'm gonna say
Who's scoring in extra time?
okay. So I got the French scoring first. I got Mbappe getting an early goal. And then I have Füllkrug getting an equalizer off a set piece, probably a scramble. And then I got Dennis Undav coming off the bench
Yeah, that's a good shout, I
and
think.
sneaking a goal, edge of the box, probably nice little curler. Duke can shoot. He's going to be the Turkish German to give Germany their first European trophy since 1996, the year I was born. Probably a fantasy, but I mean,
No, I hope, and I think and it's not so unrealistic.
yeah.
I
And
think that
I guess as we wrap up, Adam, like I remember 2006, that World Cup was very special for Germany. It was kind of the first chance for the German nation after reunification to show the world that it had become a new country. It's free from the vestiges of the Second World War. It's become a very beautiful democracy with lots of diverse people. 18 years on, it's like another chance, I think, for the Germans to show the world again, like, hey, we can put on a good tournament. Adam, what would it mean for the German country right now? I'm not privy to what's going on there politically or socially, but what would it mean to have a good tournament, not just for the national team, but just kind of to show a good face to the world?
Yeah, of course. I mean, an international tournament, especially an international tournament in a country like Germany, where it's a quite small country to host a tournament of this scale, so you really have almost every region of Germany taking part, and almost the entire country in football fever. It's always huge. I think that it's a big moment also with the European elections
Mm,
happening this summer and the German elections next winter. Um, and you see across Germany also not just like football memorabilia, but also the various parties in the election advertising their campaigns, and also yeah, some stark contrasts in their campaigns when you look at campaigns like every Mensch ist illegal, which is every person is legal, or other ones that
mhm,
are basically saying to strengthen the borders and to
right.
yeah to keep Germany German is kind of what the slogan
Mhm,
would be there, right? And so that's going to be an interesting dynamic when you see kind of a flood of not just um, various people from different countries coming to Germany, but also the flood of German immigrants going to games, like
mhm.
Turkish Germans, for example. Fortunately, Greece didn't make it to the competition, but
Yeah.
that would have also been a spectacle because of the Greek population here in Germany. But
Yes.
also Italian Germans, right? I mean, our Italian restaurants here in Germany are almost to 90% owned by Italians and not by Germans imitating Italian cuisine. So German is one of the countries that really has a huge immigrant presence from across Europe and even from diaspora in Africa and
Mm.
the United States even as well from myself. So yeah, it's a really interesting country to host kind of a I would say a global event, even though there's only European teams. I do see it as a global event, and so it will be cool to see kind of all these different cultures come together in cities like, for example, Cologne, which has a lot of foreign tourists all the time and gets a lot of attention also, but also maybe in some of the other cities like in Leipzig, for example,
Mhm,
which maybe aren't necessarily on the top of every tourist list, and it's in East Germany, which obviously has its history of its own and has a completely different dynamic to cities like Cologne and West Germany where I live, but to also see how they will engage with an international tournament of this scale and how that maybe can also shape opinions for the upcoming elections here in Germany, with people understanding kind of what it's like actually with foreign impact and to yeah deal with a large cultural influx in one isolated summer event.
Yeah, well, here's hoping that Germany has a great tournament. Guys, I'm gonna link Adam's Twitter and also his Substack in the video. He does a lot of great work. Adam, can you wanna let our viewers know what you're gonna be up to in the summer and kind of promote what you're gonna be doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be working for Magenta Sport
Cool.
here in Germany. They'll be broadcasting all the games for German television. Um, I'm going to be working with the commentators, doing some data analysis for various matches to kind of help them prepare for the tournament. And then it's still in the works at the moment, but I'm also trying to set up a little Twitch studio to also maybe stream some games, to do some live reactions, to kind of talk through fixtures and see if Albert can get involved in that as well, to see
Love to.
as many people as possible to get involved in that. But yeah, a lot in the works, and otherwise, like Albert said, I think Twitter is kind of the best place to follow me or keep up with my work, because that's where you'll stay up to date with anything that happens around me, and also with my discussions about the German national team that will undoubtedly come this summer.
Sounds good. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on, Adam. Really appreciated you being here. Guys, we'll have lots of content coming this summer, not just for the Euros, but also for Copa America. Until then, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.